Hi, Marie here from Pottery Crafters. In this video, I'll experiment with different ways to prevent clay from sticking to non-porous surfaces. All the supplies used in this video are listed for you below in the show notes. I'll make circle slabs 6 inches across with this cookie cutter using Laguna Soldate 60 clay. I'll place them on this textured glass serving platter. I thought this platter was good to experiment with because the grooves are deep enough to get a good pattern. Then I'll place the clay in this smooth bowl. This demonstration will help to see if the clay sticks or not to each surface. Let's find out which ones will work the best and which one is my favorite. I'm going to start with cornstarch. I found this powder puff works really well. I'll start with the glass serving platter. Apply a good amount of cornstarch on the textured pattern and to the clay. Then place the clay on the glass. Using a rolling pin, press the soft clay into the indentations of the pattern. Let's see if the clay sticks to the glass. It came off the glass, but not as easily as I hoped. The clay did stick a bit in one spot. Maybe I needed a bit more cornstarch. Let's see how the cornstarch does on a smooth surface. As pressure was applied by the rolling pin, the clay did spread out a bit, so I'll cut the circle again. Place a layer of cornstarch in the bowl and the clay slab. Press down on the clay to reach the bottom of the bowl, but I don't want to press too hard on the pattern because I want to make jewelry holders out of the ones that turn out. Set this aside until the clay is leather hard. Let's see how the cornstarch did on the smooth surface. I'll use this rubber pen to lift the clay out of the bowl. The clay came out nicely and didn't stick to the surface. It's nice and smooth, and the cornstarch will burn off in the kiln when you bisque fire. Would I use cornstarch? I would use it for smooth surfaces. I think I'd also use it for textured surfaces if I used enough cornstarch to prevent it from sticking. You do have to be careful not to apply the cornstarch too thick. It may cake in spots and not make a good clean pattern in the clay. If you'd want to apply underglaze, you could wipe the cornstarch off with a wet sponge, but that would entail another step. Next on my list is cheesecloth. I'll use one thin layer. I'll apply enough pressure to make sure the clay gets into the grooves of the pattern. Pull up the cheesecloth. It does separate the clay from the glass and did replicate the pattern on the platter, but left marks from the cheesecloth on the clay, which is actually fine if you're looking to create that look. Let's see how it does on the smooth surface. I'm making sure the clay touches the bottom of the bowl. Set this aside until it's leather hard. The cheesecloth lifts the clay right out of the bowl, creating a sufficient barrier. I can faintly see marks from the cheesecloth, probably because I didn't have to put much pressure on the clay. And you can smooth it right out or leave it if you wish. Would I use cheesecloth? I think if I wanted to create a pattern from the cheesecloth. Otherwise, I'd use another method that made the surface smooth and not leave clay behind on the glass surface. Next, a thin piece of cloth was recommended as a barrier. I selected this scarf. It does slide around a bit on the platter, so I'll tuck it in and be careful when rolling it out. Make sure to apply steady, even pressure as I roll over the pattern so the scarf doesn't move. Lifts right off the platter, which is what I wanted. and the clay peels off the scarf nicely. Place the scarf and clay in the bowl and gently press to the bottom. For some basic tips on hand building, you can check out my video on 21 tips for hand building pottery. I left the link for you below in the show notes. After the clay is leather hard, I can easily pull it out of the bowl, and the surface is smooth. Would I use a thin cloth like this scarf? Yes, I would. The only thing I'd be concerned about is the scarf slipping on the non-porous surface and messing up the pattern on the clay. I think it created a good barrier between the non-porous surfaces and the clay. If I choose cloth, I would choose a thinner cloth like this scarf. Next, I'll try plastic cling wrap. First, I'll place a sheet of plastic cling wrap on the glass platter without stretching it out. Place the clay sample in the middle of the plate and roll it out. I can lift it right off the plate, and it replicates the pattern on the glass nicely. The plastic peels off the clay effortlessly, leaving the clay nice and smooth. Now I'll place the plastic wrap on the clay and into the bowl. Gently pushing the clay to the bottom. After waiting until it's leather hard, I can just grab the plastic and the clay comes right out of the bowl. Plastic peels right off, revealing a nice smooth surface. Would I use plastic cling wrap? Yes, I would. It's easy to work with and the clay doesn't stick to the cling wrap. You can hit the like button anytime during this video. Subscribe if you haven't already, and hit the bell icon to get notified whenever a new video comes out. Now I'll move on to a more slippery method. This time I'll try using 10W40. Spray it on the serving platter. Gently wipe to make sure the 10W40 covers the area. The glass becomes quite slippery, so I'll try not to move the clay and apply consistent pressure with the rolling pin. The clay slides easily off the glass, capturing a nice pattern. Now let's see how it works on a smooth surface. Spray some in the bowl. The clay slides effortlessly to the bottom of the bowl. After it's leather hard, I'll lift it out. The clay doesn't seem to want to come out. I thought the clay would slip right out of the bowl. But it needs some prompting with my rubber pen. It finally lifts out. The clay is smooth and doesn't stick, but it is a bit slippery. Now the clay will be slippery if you want to carve anything into the leather hard clay. However, the 10W40 will absorb into the clay as it dries, so you will be able to apply underglaze, and the oil left in the clay will burn off in the kiln during the bisque fire. Would I use 10W40? Well, I appreciate that it creates a nice barrier. I personally wouldn't use it because it's too slippery for me in the plastic workable stage and in the leather hard stage. Next on my list is vegetable oil. I'll pour some vegetable oil on the serving platter and rub it all around, making sure it gets into the grooves of the design. Place the clay sample on the platter and roll it out. Well, the clay doesn't want to come off. I'm quite surprised by this. I can feel there's enough oil under there. It's all over my fingers. I'm giving up on this one. In all fairness, I'll try the vegetable oil again. It seems to be lifting off. No, it's still sticking. I'll use my rubber pen. Not as bad, but still stuck. I'll try the bowl. Push the clay to the bottom. The clay does move around in the bowl. That's a good sign. Let it get leather hard. Now I'll see if the clay sticks in the bowl. It seems to be stuck. After a bit of prodding with my rubber pen, the clay popped right out. Keep in mind I did not apply as much pressure when pressing it into the bowl. The clay is smooth, but left some small cracks. Would I use vegetable oil? No. Even though the vegetable oil does work for some potters, it did not work for me. I'm glad I tried it so I know not to use it. Let's move on to the next one. After the vegetable oil fail, let's see how Pam works. Spray it on and rub it around to make sure all the glass is covered. Roll it out. It is slippery, so I have to make sure that the clay doesn't move around on the platter. The clay came right off with the Pam barrier. I'll do the same with the smooth surface in the bowl. Oh, the Pam does make the clay slippery. It's slipperier than the 10W40. Lift the clay out after it's leather hard. Well, the clay slipped right out of the bowl. Nice smooth surface. Would I use Pam? Even though Pam didn't make the clay stick, and as the clay dries, the Pam will absorb into the clay. So you can use underglaze. And the Pam will also burn off in the kiln during the bisque fire. With that said, I would use it if I had nothing else, because again, I don't care to work with the oily barrier. Let's try the next one. Next, I'll experiment with paper towels. I was told to use a cheap, thinner paper towel. I'm guessing because it might leave a pattern from the thicker paper towel and may not pick up the texture from the glass onto the clay. Roll out the clay. Press down to ensure the clay gets into the grooves and ridges. It lifts right off the glass. Most of the paper towel comes right off, leaving a smooth pattern on the clay. Any paper towel left on the clay will burn off in the kiln. Now let's test it on a smooth surface. Pushing down to make sure the clay is in contact with the bottom of the bowl. Set it aside until it's leather hard. Now that the clay can stand on its own, just grab the paper towel and the clay comes right out. The surface is nice and smooth. Would I use paper towels? Yes, I would, especially on a smooth surface. I would with a textured surface also if I wasn't applying underglaze or slip, because the paper may stick to the clay. Keeping in the paper theme, I'll try using tissue paper or Kleenex. I'll place the tissue paper on the platter. Roll out the clay and ensure the clay gets into the grooves. It lifts right off the platter, capturing the pattern beautifully. The tissue does peel off, but left some on the clay, which is okay because it'll burn right off in the kiln during the bisque fire. Now I'll place the clay on another piece of tissue and form it into the bowl. Once it reaches the leather hard stage, I can lift the clay out by grabbing the tissue. It peels right off, leaving the clay smooth. Would I use tissue paper? Sure. It's easy to work with and sturdy enough to grab and lift the clay right out of the bowl. Keep in mind, if you can't peel off the Kleenex, I would personally not apply slip or underglaze, because I don't want to be fiddling around trying to get all the Kleenex off of the pattern. I have a post on my Pottery Crafters website on choosing whether to apply underglaze to greenware or bisqueware. I left the link for you below in the show notes. Now, last but not least, I was told to try toilet paper. I'm trying single layer Scott. Place 2 rows on the platter, roll out the clay. The clay does lift right off the glass and replicated the texture perfectly. Peel off the toilet paper. It's so fine, I wouldn't fiddle around with trying to get it off the clay. Just lift any loose paper away and let the rest burn off in the kiln when bisque fired. Now place the toilet paper on the clay, then press it into the bowl. After the clay is leather hard, let's see how it lifts out of the bowl. Well, I'm surprised. With the paper being so fine, I was able to lift it right out of the bowl, and it peeled off the smooth surface. Probably because I didn't apply as much pressure as I did to the textured surface. And the clay is nice and smooth. Would I use toilet paper? Why, yes, I would. I think it creates a good barrier. I don't mind the paper sticking if I don't plan on carving or applying any underglaze or slip. This has been a fun experiment exploring different ways to prevent clay from sticking to non-porous surfaces. It's good to know what will work and what may not. Cornstarch may or may not work, depending on the thickness of the application. Plus, if you apply too much cornstarch, it may cause pitting where the cornstarch was clumped after it's fired in the kiln. The thin cloth and the plastic cling wrap I found were good choices and provided a great barrier between the non-porous surfaces and the clay. Whereas the vegetable oil didn't work for me at all. It failed several times on the textured surfaces. The other ones like 10W40 and PAM do work. The downside for me is that they are greasy. But if you don't mind that, I would go with 10W40 or PAM instead of vegetable oil. I found paper towels and tissues, and even toilet paper all work well. And I would use cheesecloth if I wanted to leave a pattern behind. My favorite is plastic cling wrap. It's good to have choices. Which one will you choose? You watching helps me to make more videos like this one. Now head on over to my 5 cool ways to glaze wavy bowls video, or my guide to glazing and over-glazing candle holders video. If you do, I get to play with more clay. Let's stay dirty.